Hello, my name is Carlos Cuestas, and I am an associate in strategic partnerships and programming at Copland Center for the Arts at Queens College. I want to welcome you to another iteration of the Music Makers Alumni Concert Series, featuring graduates from the Aaron Copland School of Music at Queens College. As winter gives way to spring, our online programming continues to bring you concerts, visual arts presentations, and literary readings. We are thankful for the opportunity that you give us to continue to bring you world-class, accessible, and affordable programming during these troubled times. The Music Makers Alumni Series and all of our spring programming is part of Kupferberg Center's 2020-2021 season, proudly brought to you by our lead sponsor, the New York Community Bank, with additional support from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, Resorts World Casinos, and the Max and Selma Kupferberg Family Foundation. We thank our sponsors and we thank you, without whom we wouldn't be able to bring these talented artists to the screen. Today, we bring you Aaron Copland School of Music graduate Oscar Perez. Oscar, a Queens native, is a versatile pianist whose commitment to Latin jazz is only comparable to his dedication to the literature of the instrument across musical eras. Oscar has traveled extensively and performed with jazz legends like Bunky Green, George Russell, Curtis Fuller, and George Garzone. Oscar's debut album, Nuevo Comienzo, employs an instrumental quintet of extraordinary New York-based artists featuring Wycliffe Gordon and guitarist Peter Bernstein. Remember, after this show, Oscar will be taking questions from the audience, so stay tuned and feel free to ask questions on the comment section on Facebook or YouTube. Finally, don't forget to visit our website, www.cofferbercenter.org, or our official media channels to find out about the rest of our spring programming. We thank you for tuning in and enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome to my performance for the Music Makers Concert Series. My name is Oscar Perez, and I graduated from the Aaron Copland School of Music in 2002 as a jazz performance major. My program is about my love for composition. In this program, I'm going to focus on my influences of Afro-Cuban music and American jazz. I'd like to thank the Kupferberg Center for the Arts at Queens College for the opportunity to participate in the Music Makers Concert Series. And don't forget to tune in to our live Q&A after the performance. Enjoy the show.
All right, all right. Carlos, I think at this point, a big round of applause is the first thing that's in order. Oscar Perez and his amazing trio, just an incredible concert. Glad that everybody has joined us. I'm John Yanofsky, the director of Kupferberg Center for the Arts, joined by my colleague, Carlos Cuestas, part of our ongoing KCA Online series going into 21, into the winter and spring. This was our Music Makers series, focusing on alumni of the Aaron Copland School of Music. Carlos, I mean, what are your first thoughts right out of the gate?
John, I mean, heartwarming, classy. It brings hope for better weather. I think we're gonna get it next week. So it's that kind of performance that you kind of have an expectation that you know what you're gonna get, and then it hits you that this is unique, that this is such a talented group of musicians, and Queens native and Queens College alum, Oscar Perez. Like, what else is there to say, right?
Perfect segue. So let's bring Oscar into the studio, have an opportunity to say hello. Oscar, man, again, really
Well
beautiful,
done,
beautiful
well done.
concert, man.
Thank you very much. We had a wonderful time recording it, and it makes me just want to get back to playing live as soon as possible in a safe way.
Yeah, and it makes us want to be there
Yes.
live in a
Yeah,
safe way. But until
definitely.
that time,
Right.
we're going to enjoy and thoroughly maximize this virtual space. So, really, just kind of want to maybe start, Oscar, just sharing a little bit about your recording session. I saw you put up the graphic of your bandmates, but maybe just talk a little bit about who performed with you, kind of how you put your set together, and
Sure.
also, yeah, where you recorded too. It's a really interesting space.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to it's the Leschowitz Theater, the Leschowitz Concert Hall that we have at the Cali School of Music at Montclair State University. It's currently where I teach, and I'm coordinator of jazz studies. And it's a wonderful hall. We really enjoy playing there. We have a wonderful resource in the Cali School to be able to put on concerts. And yeah, and Steve Johns and Bill Mooring, bass player and drummer, bassist Bill Mooring, and drummer Steve Johns. They've been playing with me for wow, I think we're going on almost 10 years now of playing. We've known each other since I moved out here to New Jersey, and even though I am born and bred in Queens, but they're great musicians. Both Bill and Steve have played with just about everybody, and I just feel so lucky and blessed that they were available and they were amenable to having me, you know, asked them to play, and we just had a wonderful time. It was great. I hadn't seen them in person. We hadn't played in a while, and so it was really a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. So I want to give a shout out to them.
That's wonderful, Oscar. I mean, yeah, what a great performance. And as you said, like we can't wait to be back in person, obviously safely, but experiencing music like this, like as close to life as we can get, it's really so heartwarming. But I want to talk to you a little bit about your upbringing as a pianist, more than any other aspect at the moment. Like, I read a little bit about you. I know you were kind of like, or you're versatile in both the classical styles and the sort of like more jazz slash Latin jazz sort of
Right.
styles. So I do wonder, like, how do you combine classical and non-classical piano styles, or does that even factor in the way you approach music? Is that something that you kind of take into account, or not necessarily?
It's funny. Like, I mean, there's so many ways to answer that question. I will say that for me, one of the main things is when you're starting out, a lot of pianists and piano teachers use classical music in order to teach literature, to teach technique, to teach theory. And I certainly was no different in that, taking piano lessons from very young and playing, Bach and Mozart and all of the wonderful classical literature, because there's so much written for the piano. As I got into high school and I started to get into more popular music, more contemporary styles, and realizing that I can major in jazz, I kind of got bit by that bug. So by the time I was 20 years old, which is, about 10 years after I started really playing, I was already into the world of jazz 100%. And it was very soon after that I came to the realization that it's just music, it's all just music. And my favorite pianists all played some classical, or they played some funk or some pop or some gospel. Some of my favorite musicians just really didn't let those lines kind of get in their way. They blurred the lines, and those are the pianists that I really loved. People like Kenny Kirkland, who I fell in love with when he was playing with Sting, but then I heard him on a Branford Marsalis record, and then I heard him playing some Latin music. You know, he's half Puerto Rican, so like I was like, oh my God, this guy does everything. He's playing keyboards, so he's playing, you know. So that for me was like, it was a sign that you don't just have to do one thing. And that's when I rediscovered the love of my father's Cuban music and my mother Colombian music. And so I started to fuse it together, you know, and even though I was in this world of learning and jazz and continuing to play, you know, my Beethoven and my Brahms, I realized that I was not going to let those genres or those lines define the music that I loved and how I wanted to express myself. So, and that, you know, and it's funny because now when I take a piano intro, and I'm going to give you a quick story about it. When I take a piano intro, I think of Roland Hanna, Sir Roland Hanna, who was my piano teacher at Queens College. When I got to Queens College, I had already done a year of a master's program at New England Conservatory. Got to study with the great Danilo Perez. When I got to Queens and studied with Roland, we did Debussy, we did Jelly Roll Morton, Scott Joplin. I mean, just the earliest of the earliest, right? And after about a year, I said to him, I said, "Oh, we're doing Chopin and all kinds of stuff as well." I said, Roland, when am I going to start playing some jazz, man? Should have known better. And he said, "Young man," and he said, "What are you playing right now?" And I was playing like a Chopin, I don't remember, like a Polonaise or something like that. He said, "Okay, which Polonaise?" And I told him which one, and he kind of played through the first, you know, page flawlessly, I might add. So already the jaw is dropping. And then he said, "Well, give me a standard you like." And I said, Body and Soul." He proceeded for the next 10 minutes to play Body and Soul as if Chopin had written and arranged it. And I was like, okay, that's it. No more. I realize now it's not about jazz. It's not about classical. It's not about Cuban music. It's about playing the instrument well and finding the way you're going to express that music. And that's why he was one of my, amongst so many amazing teachers I've had over the years. That was a lesson that never left me. And so when I take a piano solo or I take a piano intro now, I think of him and I think of the fact that it's just music. It's just music. And the more music you know, the more you're going to be able to express yourself.
Yeah. And John, before you go on to the next question, we do invite our audiences to participate on the comment section of whether YouTube or Facebook, where you're watching. Hit us up and Oscar will answer all your questions, like when did you start playing, for instance, or things like that. So anyway, in the meantime, John, I wonder if you have another question for Oscar.
Well, I just really love that story about, you know, where you're really in the presence of genius and they can kind of strip things down to help you build things back up, which really is kind of the role of education and certainly a higher ed, particularly at the level of Aaron Copland School of Music. So just look, what other elements of your experience at ACSM at Queens College specifically have like really informed and influenced your trajectory, both as a performer and as an educator?
Oh, that's a great question. I feel that the time that I spent with Michael Mossman was amazing, because as soon as I got to Queens College, he was like, "Well, you have to get with Roland Hanna and you have to get with Antonio Hart." And I said, "Okay, great. I'm game, you know." But it was really two of his classes that kind of changed the trajectory of my entire life from that point on. The first one was his music business class, in which we did not really talk about copyright and managers and agents. We did talk about that enough so we knew what was going on, but he talked to us about how to create art in a world where no one really cares about artists. All right. How are you going to pay your mortgage with art? How are you going to raise children with art? How are you going to do all these things? Because you need to support yourself. So how can you create that world? And so his music business class was very instrumental in me having the wherewithal and the information to, within a couple of years, buy a house and not have to worry about trying to make art. And so that to me was a very important lesson. And on top of that, I was in his arranging classes, and my first paid opportunities to arrange and to write were through Michael Mossman. And so I have a lot. I owe a great debt to him, because he basically got me started on what it's like to be an adult professional musician and have that mindset. So that to me was, and then of course, Roland, Hanna, and Antonio Hart were great. And Antonio remains a friend to this day. And so I'm just, I was very grateful to have gone to Queens when I went to Queens.
Yeah, and I do. That's beautiful, by the way. And there's a good segue for a question that I have. But in the meantime, I do want to bring some comments in from our audience members. Johnny, would you like to take on some of these comments?
Yeah, I mean, there's this great one here by Zelde Melovitz. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. And this was going back to kind of your conversation with Sir Roland Hanna, which is like, Duke was obviously asked about, what kind of music do you like, or what's the difference between this? And he's like, there's just one kind of music. It's good music. Right. So Zelde has this up here. Mr. Ellington said, there's only good music, and then all the other stuff. And it's like, it can seem a cliche and trite, but it's actually you're living proof and, of that adage.
Right. Well, it's funny. He's sometimes he's misquoted as saying there's two kinds of music, the good kind and the bad kind, but he was too much of a gentleman to ever say anything negative. So he said there are two kinds of music, the good kind and the other kind.
Yeah. And we have like a testament to that actually by Cindy Katz. Quote, "It was a beautiful concert. I don't usually listen to jazz, and I am so happy I was able to listen." So there we go. It's not even jazz, right?
Thank you so much, Cindy. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So sort of like going back to the conversation or the stories you were talking about Queens College. I mean, there is this question I like to pose to the music makers, artists, and it's like, what advice would you give to ACSM students today? Given, I mean, I think it's almost speak for itself of what you've already shared with us. But 2021,
yeah,
we 1 year into a pandemic, we were just off camera talking about what you have had to do in order to keep yourself current. So I wonder if you could share some of your wisdom with our Queens College audience.
Well, I think that it's about persistence. It really is. It really is about persistence and finding that thing you love to do. Because of course, the saying that if, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. But that's really true. It's trite because it's true. I feel like the landscape is always changing. But then again, this was the same conversation we were having 20 years ago when, people stopped buying CDs or when people started having cell phones. And so, the landscape is changing, the demise of the record business or the music business in terms of the record companies and that kind of thing. So the idea that how you do it, that's always going to change, but that you do it, that you find a way to do it, that you find a way to create that space. I tell my students at Montclair State University, and especially now that I'm teaching this class modeled after Mike Mossman's class called Art and Survival. And in this class, I teach them that you have to fight tooth and nail for every second of every day that you want to be creative. And so I think that ultimately is the main thing, is to be as creative as you can for as long as you can, and not say you should ignore your responsibilities as an adult, but realize that you do have to advocate for yourself and you do have to create that schedule so that you can get your work done. And I think ultimately, if you do that and you couple that with a love of what you do, and if you true love of what you do, then you'll be okay. You'll find a way, because this is, what do they say? The best laid plans, right? So, you find a way, but the main thing is that you have a plan and you start on that plan.
And one thing that I'm always amazed and impressed with are folks who are able to establish themselves as professional performers and develop themselves as incredibly adept teachers and educators, because they don't always equal each other. You can be an incredible performer, but not necessarily a great communicator, and vice versa. But for yourself, I'm just so curious of how your performing as a professional musician informs your teaching and your running of the jazz program at Montclair State, and then vice versa. How does your teaching inform and influence your playing and performing and composing as a professional musician?
That's a great question. I think that it would be disingenuous of me to talk and to try to teach someone how to be a professional musician without being one myself. And so I think that as long as I continue to do those things, I will be able to teach from a place of experience. And so I may not have the answer for you, but I will tell you how I dealt with it. And hopefully between that, with that information, you can make your own path. They inform each other. They yeah, they totally inform each other. When I go on the road and I encounter something, whether it be good or bad or difficult, I bring that back to the classroom and I say, this is what happened. And I'm very real about what's going on. And so people are informed about what's out there. So I think that they inform each other. I think it's easy. That's the easy part, is to be able to tell your students, this is what happened, and be real about what happens in the world, and don't sugarcoat it. I just think it's not the right way to do things. And in the other way, I mean, you know what they say, right? If you want to know if you really know something, try teaching it to someone else. And so I feel like if I tell my students, you should really learn how to play giant steps in 5, I'm like, maybe I should really learn how to play giant steps in 5, like whatever the thing might be. So if I have if there's a student that needs to learn a concept or a tune or whatever, I say, well, let's learn it together. I need to brush up on that. So we'll play together a lot, so I feel like it's one thing to say, go do that if you have, and then not do it yourself. So to that end, I always give credit to the people that taught me things. If I pass it along, say, I got this from such and such a person. I think that's the right thing to do. But then also be real about if somebody says, hey, how do you do this? And if I don't know, I'm like, I don't know. I'd love to learn it, but I think you can get the answer if you ask so-and-so, or if let's find out from this source or that source. So it's just about not BSing the student about what you know and what you don't know.
Yeah, clearly there was an early trajectory for yourself also in this kind of move into education, because you, as we shared, and we have a comment from one of your colleagues back in the early Kupferberg days, right? With Dee Firestone
Dee,
and yourself creating a jazz curriculum with Kupferberg under your auspice at the Aaron Copland School of Music. And maybe we could just put up Dee Dee's comment where we were kind of, our social media guy was goading her into dropping some stories. And she says hint taken, but she kept it real clean on the up and up. When I worked at Kupferberg in the 90s, sorry to date people, we started a jazz residency for high school students, and Oscar was our biggest fan, actually wrote the curriculum. So maybe just share real quickly what that project was about. I've seen the evidence of it, but wasn't around when it happened. I've always been inspired by that history of that program.
Well, first of all, Dee Dee might have started working for Kupferberg or for, back then it was called the Colden Center, in the 90s, but I didn't come along until like the early 2000s. So I'm not, So I graduated from Queens College, I think it was in 2002. And shortly thereafter, Mike Mossman, again, he recommended Kathy Elliott, a wonderful vocalist and educator who now lives in Ecuador, and we're still great friends, recommended us to write this curriculum. And basically what it was is we wanted to send, or Colden Center, now Kupferberg, wanted to send Queens College alumni to different high schools in Queens to do classes on what is jazz for high schoolers, just to keep it happening, to keep the music, fresh, and to keep people, interested in what is jazz, the new generation. And so they decided, okay, well, we need a curriculum and we need to write something about the different aspects of jazz. And so we wrote, if I remember correctly, we wrote something on every style of jazz, and something on different meters, and something on the history of jazz. And, we wrote like 7 or 8 1-hour master classes and put it together in a binder. And so we would have these teaching artists, and we did the teacher trainings, which was basically at first all our friends. And then it was all of the people that came through the program on how to go into the high schools, how to engage the students, how, best practices for presenting a master class. And I guess that was one of my first forays into like teaching at a university level, how to speak in front of people, how to have a plan, and how to formulate ideas. And it's funny, I didn't even realize I was doing that back then. And that was almost 20 years ago. And so it was very natural. I guess I was okay at it, but I'm I'd love another shot of rewriting that curriculum.
For the 21st century, may I add.
Right, right, right.
Yeah, I mean, and speaking of which, Zeldy Malevich writes a very important questions for what we're going through, and especially because we're kind of seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. It may not be the light, but and Zeldy asks, with so many live venues closing, how do you see the future for those of us who love and support live performances?
Well, look, I think clubs closing and clubs opening, that has always happened. You
Mm.
know, if you look, if you read, and if you really do your research, like clubs close all the time, clubs open all the time. Jazz musicians, we're like roaches, when we always find a place, and then we invite our friends, and then they close the place down and we have to go somewhere else. No, but and of course, it is sad when a club like, say, the Jazz Standard closes, because not only is it a very important club, but it's one that operates all the time. But we still have Smalls, and we still have the Blue Note, and we still have the Vanguard, and we still have Smoke. So that's always going to happen. So I think two things. Number one, I think that these kind of opportunities and these kind of things like live streaming, I think they're here to stay. I think people recognize that this is not an instead of, it's an addition to, both in the performance world as well as the education world. And then on top of that, I think that clubs will continue to open. And because people are hungry to go hear live music, they realize now, we've realized what we've been missing. People are going to be more apt, especially in the first few years after we're all back to normal. And again, I say normal with huge quotation marks, right? I think they're going to see more opportunities. So I think it's not going to be what it was, but it's going to continue in the way that it's supposed to continue in this environment. The music is way too good, and the people that support it are way too supportive for it to go anywhere else. So thank you for the question. And before I forget, I have to give a shout out to Dee Dee Firestone, because, she's like awesome, and she was so helpful, and we still keep in touch. And so, hey, Dee Dee.
Oh man, that's beautiful. And it's interesting, all of these conversations centering around music in general, obviously, but then jazz, and jazz has played such an important part of you. And as someone who, I mean, is it fair to say that you do Latin jazz, right? Like, that's not a mischaracterization. I would wonder how, just a broad question, but what does Latin jazz mean to you personally, Oscar? Like, not like in a general sort of Latin jazz, this genre with this history,
Right.
but it seemed like jazz grabbed you, and then you took it and ran with it, and then you gave us one of the most interesting pieces I heard, the first one, with this 6/8/3/4 sort of Afro-Cuban bata type of sort of groove to it, and then you played Drume Negrita, which is like this beautiful Cuban classic that one of my favorite recordings is a Bola de Nieves.
Yes.
So I don't know if you could speak to that. Like, what does it mean to you as Oscar Perez?
It's a great question. I think what it is for me, it's a lot of things. First and foremost, it's the music of my homeland. It's the music of my mother and my father. And so it's my childhood. It's my upbringing. It's my DNA, music and otherwise. It's the sound of my childhood. It's the sound of my comfort zone. It's my home, right? And you can never leave your home. You know what I mean? You can try. And for me, that has always been playing jazz, playing pop, playing classical, playing gospel, playing whatever is asked of me. And I love all those music so much. But for me, Latin jazz is the mixture of my home and what I feel comfortable doing, and the foray into the unknown that jazz allows you to do, allows you to say, you know what, we're going to mix meters. We're going to, we're going to do different tempos. We're going to go atonal in this section, like on one of the tunes, so to me, it's about challenging myself to do something that I feel comfortable doing by playing like a Cuban lullaby, like Drume Negrita, but then also playing something like Cosas Lindas, which is in an odd time, and it has all these kind of jazz-like harmonies. So for me, that's what it means. It's an opportunity to fuse those two things, which is why I think it's so beautiful, and it brings to light what is truly American about this music, is all that mixture. You know what I mean? Of the fact that we are playing African rhythm and European harmony and European instruments. So that could have only happened here. You know what I mean? And so to me, that's just it's just a representation of who we are as a people.
Yeah, amen to that. As we've found ourselves with all this additional time on our hands, right, the last year, despite how busy we've all become navigating this virtual landscape, I'm just curious, like, what are you listening to these days, and what are you drawing like solace or inspiration from musically?
Wow. Yeah, sure. So right now, I don't know if we talked about this in the pre-interview, but I'm actually in my last semester of coursework at Manhattan School of Music. I'm getting my doctorate. And what a great time to get a doctorate in the middle of a pandemic. So I've been listening to a lot of different music, a lot of orchestral music. I've been listening to a lot of atonal music. I've been listening to like George Crumb and Toru Takemitsu. I'm doing piano reductions of, scores of things that I've never listened to before. And I've been writing a lot. So right now, my ears are like, they're just all over the map, and so it's a great time to be listening. But then also I've been rediscovering like the greatness of Michael Brecker. I've just been on this Michael Brecker kick. I've just been listening to all this amazing stuff that some of it I've heard and some of it reminds me of college. But then other things I'm like, how come I didn't know this record? So I've just been kind of diving deep into that. And Pat Metheny, for some reason, I've been listening to a lot of Pat. And I think those cats for me has been like, obviously being inspired, but sometimes you need a break from listening to like, Boulez or somebody, so.
Excellent. Well, on that note, I think we're going to kind of wrap things up. Oscar, it was really just an amazing pleasure and honor to listen to your music, you and your bandmates, and have this opportunity to chat. And if folks want to find out more information about yourself and kind of your music, any gigs you have coming up, you want to let folks know how to kind of follow you and find out more info?
I have a website that I really desperately need to update. It's OscarPerezMusic.com. Nowadays, we're all like on Instagram, right? So I think it's Oscar Perez Music on Instagram, and my Facebook page, I think, is Oscar Perez Musica, and music with an A at the end. I will be, for those of you in New Jersey, I will be performing a solo piano concert tomorrow at Shanghai Jazz in Madison, New Jersey. I wanted to give a shout out because now my blogging and stuff now goes towards Shanghai Jazz. But I really want to thank you for the opportunity to present my music and to be able to play, all original music with the exception of that Truma Negrita, and to be able to create something for y'all. So thank you very, very, very much. It was a blast.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was an honor. And you can always find out what's happening for other Kupferberg events by checking out our website at kupferbergcenter.org. We have a few more Music Makers concerts, part of the spring season. We're going to be back here on Tuesday, April 6th with pianist and Aaron Copland School of Music alum Jorn Swart. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And other great programs. We have an amazing reading tomorrow evening with author and playwright Claudia Rankine, and just kind of continuing our offerings in this virtual setting. So definitely wanted to thank Carlos, wanted to thank our producers and our technicians, Andreas and Teresa. Most importantly, Oscar, wanted to thank you and your musicians, and of course, all of the folks at home who obviously make these programs possible. So we hope we see you back here at the KCA Online in the very near future, but most importantly, take care of yourselves, stay well, stay healthy, and we'll see you again. Buddy, have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you so much. Good night.